Well, let's turn now to a political commentator, Adam Schwarz, who joins us from London. Thanks for taking time to speak to us here on the programme. How confident are you of a deal being reached by Wednesday?
Well, I suspect there will be a deal, but I think it's quite hard to predict purely by the fact that Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, happens to be a very unpredictable person. I think ultimately he's someone who's put his own personal political survival over the needs of the kind of national interests. But I think because of the pandemic and the conditions that it's created in terms of economic and social and consumer, that actually his focus has shifted. And I think very much his own survival does very much depend on how the country fares over the next sort of 6 months or so, because he's faced a huge amount of criticism within the UK over his handling of the pandemic. The UK has had the worst, it's been hit worst out of any of the G7 countries this year, both economically but also in terms of the death toll. So I think ultimately Boris Johnson is keen to get a deal. The one thing I would say about negotiations is that Boris Johnson really, for the last few months, has been quite focused on creating a narrative of the UK kind of winning and championing over the EU. And so I think it's quite important to interpret everything we kind of hear out of negotiations going on at the moment in terms of that. But it is quite difficult, because ultimately the only people who really know what's going on in terms of the negotiations are the people who are actually in the room.
Now, MPs in Westminster debate the internal market bill, the passing of which could see the UK break international law. How much do you think that's going to be a factor in these negotiations? Will Brussels just be waiting to see the outcome of that?
Well, I think Brussels had sort of privately indicated early in October, when the bill was first introduced, that it was willing to kind of tolerate some of these aspects on the basis that this was basically just the UK posturing and catering towards its kind of domestic political base for political capital. But I do think that the return of the internal markets bill and the UK government pushing it forward is probably the major risk factor that might disrupt negotiations in these crucial last 3 days. I think it's of key importance to trust the fact that the UK is threatening to override its previous agreement with the EU. And, this is while they're trying to agree trust and terms towards the next deal. And so I think ultimately that does have the potential to derail it. But hopefully the two sides will have come together and resolved the major issues that are kind of holding the agreement up and really have plagued negotiations over the last 3 months or so.
Insightful analysis there. Political commentator Adam Schwarz, thanks for joining us there from London.